Welcome to Growing Startups, where we talk to growth leaders and marketing professionals about how to drive sustainable growth from the ground up. I'm your host, Evelyn Cools, and I lead marketing for tech startups. I'm excited to share these candid conversations about marketing, culture, collaboration, and everything else that makes startups grow. I'm really excited for today's episode. We have Bri Leever on, who is a community strategist helping entrepreneurs launch profitable and purposeful communities. That was pretty much straight from your LinkedIn. So, Bri, I'm going to give you an opportunity to just give your own version, a little bit of an overview of your background, what you're doing at Ember, maybe even the podcast you're about to launch, because I'm sure that's top of mind. Just give us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Thanks, Evelyn. Thank you so much for having me on. And yes, a few things to cover. So I'm a community strategist and the founder at Ember, where we partner with folks who are used to running their business on coaching, consulting, or content, and we help them craft usually their first community offer with the intention of creating a business that's powered by their community. So most of my clients are building paid communities, but I also come from the free community space where free community supports an end product, which we will dig into in detail on this episode. I serve my clients through consulting packages to do that one-on-one work and really dig into launching their community or helping to pivot their community if it's not getting the results they want. And then I also have a community for people creating communities. It's very meta.
That is very meta. I love that though. What kind of community is it? Just to paint the picture a little bit. I've seen a lot of Slack communities. What's this community?
Yeah. So my community is hosted in an all-in-one platform called Heartbeat. It's a community platform. So it's designed specifically to host, I call it all-in-one, but really what that means to me is you have your events, conversation, and content all in one place. So that's kind of how it works. But practically, my community is structured from two different angles, which this is fun. We'll get to use my community as an example for the types of communities we're talking about. So I have an ongoing membership where people can join, and that's really where they're getting guidance in two ways. One is through niche industry experts like myself and a whole host of experts that I bring in to help them build and grow their community. And then the second support is that peer support. So we set up programs, events where people are actively sharing, getting feedback. I consider it almost I think about the membership like how I myself think about my long-term relationship with a therapist. It's this is something I have a community. I want it to grow and thrive. I'm choosing to invest in this network, this group of people here now before crisis hits so that when the waters get rough, I have a known group of people who know me, who understand me. We have a common language with which to articulate our problems and the issues I'm encountering. And I have a safe space to go to work through it. So that's the membership. It's like a container. And then I also have a program that I do twice a year within the community called Kindling, which is really an intensive program to help people get their community launched and create the foundation for that community. So people will join that it's perfect for people who are getting ready, gearing up to launch their community. They want the DIY version, but they want all my best frameworks and practices and strategy. But it's also great for people who maybe launched prematurely or got overeager and are oh shoot, we really need to go back and revisit the foundation of our community and make sure that's really shored up before we even intend to grow.
What a great name. That's the part that I'm thinking about, Kindling. It's perfect for what you're doing there.
Yeah. I I'm if building a community is like building a fire, then this is where we get you started. This is where we get those first embers burning with kindling.
Yeah, and I like the analogy too, because anyone who knows building a fire sometimes takes time, or like strategy on like how you're going to start it. And I think it's the same thing with communities. It's something that I think is so easy to like want to jump into and not really think too much about what goes into it and what makes it successful. Whether you're, doing it as an entrepreneur or if you have like a product, like, what I work with day to day, we've definitely thought about, starting communities for our audience. And it's something that I think gets talked about a lot. And every time we bring it up, it seems like, oh, this should just be something like so easy for us to start. Let's just like create a Slack channel and that'll be fine. So I'm really excited to have a conversation about this because I think there's a lot that goes into it. And I'm sure you know all the things that go into it.
Yeah. Oh my God. You just took that like metaphor and made it even better. That is like yeah, when people come and they think they want a community, but really what they're asking for is spontaneous combustion. And you're like,
Hmm.
spontaneous combustion is awesome, I guess, when desired, but
Yeah.
really, like, it's very rare in nature. So unless lightning strikes, our method is going to be to build a foundation for a fire. And there's so many implications, like you said, of like, once we built the fire, who's going to keep feeding the fire? There it
Yep.
doesn't just feed itself. So yeah, we can run so far on this metaphor. Maybe we just speak exclusively in metaphorical terms for the rest of this episode.
I feel like I want to take this so far, but the thing that immediately like popped in my head, which I honestly think this analogy is like something that can be used for a lot of different marketing strategies, because the amount of times I've heard from people I work with, like, oh, let's just go viral.
Yes.
I'm
Let's
like,
hit the viral
okay.
button. You know where that is, right?
Yeah, like, come on, it's like hidden here in the settings on Instagram. But yeah, it's just like really hard to explain sometimes the amount of like thought that goes into it and the amount you have to do beforehand and test and like the team you need behind this, the resources you need, the time you have to put into it to actually finally go viral. Like if you talk to people who actually go viral, they've been working on this for a really long time, unless they spontaneously combusted.
Yeah, which once in a blue moon, lightning does strike. I would not bet your whole business strategy on it, though.
Yeah, agreed, agreed. Well, I'm excited to talk about all that stuff. But I guess like taking it back a step, something I like to do at the beginning of every episode is ask you about a favorite wellness practice or ritual you have to stay grounded, because marketing, community, working for startups, entrepreneurship, whatever it is, I feel like we can pretty easily get burnt out. So, do you have
Hmm.
anything that you do on a regular basis to help with that?
Yes, I live in Hawaii.
Oh, that's it. That's your wellness practice.
That's my wellness practice. No, but really, this island keeps me so grounded. And like I'm a water worshiper, so we are like constantly in the water. I love to free dive. I love to surf. I love to scuba dive. Been swimming more because I had a bad back, so I couldn't do like the more intense activities. So I'm just usually in the water, and I think one of the best things for my mental health is enjoying the things that I have going on outside of work so much that it keeps my work really in check, like a little too in check.
You think so?
Yeah,
Is there
yeah.
is there such a thing?
Oh, yeah, probably not. That's probably my like Western capitalist mindset coming out and showing, but it really, yeah, I feel like a very vibrant, balanced version of myself here.
That's awesome. I think that's something I'm constantly striving for as well. I mean, obviously, I don't know what your day to day looks like, but from an external perspective, even just your intro, like you're clearly working on a lot of things. You're doing a lot of super cool stuff. So that seems to be working, this balance that you have in the
Yeah.
water, out of the water.
Yeah, no, it is. I have pretty good boundaries around my work. There's a lot going on for sure, but yeah, my life outside of work is also even more fun. So
As it should be.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think I live in LA, so I'm close to the water too, but we keep getting these alerts that it's too toxic to swim in.
Oh
So
no. Oh no.
that's
Oh
the sad
boo.
part. So hopefully that gets better, because I am also a water worshiper and have lived not near the water for a while, and I'm now just super happy to be back. So
Oh,
I
good
definitely
for
feel you
you.
on that.
Yes. Oh, it gives you life. Yeah. Yep.
It
Completely
does.
agree.
All right. Speaking of life, we're going to talk about the life of communities. And before we started this recording, we already briefly talked about the 4 different types of communities, the way you kind of see these broken up. So maybe we can just start there, super high level. What are those different types of communities if someone's thinking of starting one?
Yeah, great question. So the 4 different types of communities that I have come up with. I feel like you're not really a community strategist unless you have your own matrix. So there is like a matrix that goes along with this, but I'll do my best to just verbally describe it. So there's 2 different factors that I consider, just to keep it super simple. And one is the community free or is it paid? Most are a combination. Everybody calm down. I know I'm being very polarizing right now. That's
Everyone's
the
got their pitchforks ready.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, it can only be free or paid. No, no, no. I'm going to set up so with this structure, I want to set up like either or scenarios, knowing that like almost every community has a combination. But I found that, especially for people starting out, the more easily you can wrap your mind around like one box that your community falls into, the easier it's going to be to launch and the easier it's going to be for people to understand what your community is. So, first factor, is it free? Is it paid? The second factor, is it more education centric or more connection centric? Every community has a combination of both. Some have, like, frankly, an even 50-50 split. But identifying, especially in the beginning, is this slightly more education focused or slightly more connection focused, will help you anticipate the strengths that you're signing up for in your community, as well as some of the challenges that inherently you are going to encounter. So, in the first, let's see, the first quadrant, I have free communities. Actually, I think technically this is the fourth quadrant. Don't don't call me out on being a mathematics minor and not remembering what quadrants are which. But
Wait, are you talking about the top left corner?
yeah,
Because that's what
yeah.
I'm envisioning. Is that
So
technically the fourth
I,
quadrant? That sounds like it should be the first, but
those
I
to me
guess we
too.
can leave it at that.
Okay,
Top left, everyone.
visually, everyone, come with me. Top left for us simpletons. We're looking at free and education centric. So I call these nurturing communities. And this is where the community is designed to provide communal educational experiences that support your product or service in some way. A lot of tech and SaaS products, if they are looking to build a community for their customers, will start here. And these
Mm.
communities tend to live really well if you have a customer success department. That tends to be a really natural birthplace for these communities. So, nurturing communities are can be an amazing resource for people to not only learn how to use your tool better in their whatever practice it is that your tool serves, but also to slowly start to connect those people together. They usually come for the education, and then our goal is now we need to move them into connection. Now that they've come for the education, how can we move them into connection? The nice thing about these communities is anytime it's more education centric, the outcome is a lot more clear for your members because you're saying, come join this community. You will undergo this learning experience. Here's what you will learn, and here are the outcomes. So it's easier to sell, it's easier to get new members in, but it can be a little bit harder to get those members connecting because it's not connection focused necessarily. All right, that's nurturing.
I guess I have a follow-up question
Yeah,
for that
please.
one. Because you mentioned this is probably where like SaaS companies might start. And that is also what I've seen the most. Even like top level, like doing educational webinars, I feel like is a big
Mm-hmm.
way to start doing this, or putting together papers or like handbooks on how to do certain things. So maybe from like a very practical perspective, how would you suggest, I guess, making that community more legitimate outside of
Yeah.
like, oh, they attend a webinar? I don't know if legitimate is the right word, but like, how do you start actually pulling people in? Are there like certain platforms that you recommend, or what's that kind of the kindling for this?
Yeah, yep. And what I hear you asking too is like, well, at what point does it like become a community? Because you might have
Yes.
all these like educational experiences. Is an educational experience a community? I personally draw the line where I say it becomes a community once you have a group of people who have an identity as a member of that group.
Mm.
Now, that community is really strong when there's a common purpose, common intention, and common goals between those people. But really, the key for me is like an identity shift. So this is where it's really important for us to define like audience versus community, because an audience member is in the habituated and normalized behavior of being a follower and a consumer. Whereas a community member, once they've taken on this identity as a member of your community, they are more a participant and an active like member. That's how I define it. Obviously, there are like just endless gray areas in between that. You'll have community members who identify as like lurkers. They're not like actively participating. They probably like engage in your community more like a follower, but which is fine, whatever. Like we don't need to get into the whole debate, but that's how I like distinguish the difference. So someone coming to your webinar series is great. Like if you ask them like if they were a member of your webinar series, like that sounds kind of awkward, right? They're like, "What?" No, I attended.
Yeah, I attended. I think that identity piece is actually so important, and I had never really thought about it like that yet. I mean, for example, the webinars that I'm running, we see the same people over and over again, and they're the ones that are active in the Q&A. Like, is that an indication, like from what, I guess, like, I'm trying to think, at what point do you see enough indicators that maybe starting a community could be something interesting for the people that interact with your brand?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so I would call those like really hot and really warm leads for your
Mm-hmm.
first early community members. And one of the best signs of like is your audience ready for a community is like, are they asking you for it? Are they
Mm-hmm.
asking you to be connected to other members? Are they like DMing each other and like, "Oh, we connected on this call. We should follow up." And sometimes that's really hard to track.
Mm.
Sometimes you just like hear it through the grapevine and they're like, "Oh yeah, I connected with Evelyn after that call and they were awesome." And that's like those are seeds of like early community building. So it might be a good signal and green flag to you that like your community has some interest there. The other really easy way to do it is just to ask them in a survey. You can like slowly start to like build on those events are like my favorite way to test a community, by the way. So you use the perfect example. When we start with events, there's like ways to slowly start to layer on like a few more communal experiences and kind of build momentum there. And yeah, starting with those members who are the most active, who are chatting, who like you know them off the top of your head. It's like who are the top 10 people who like
Mm-hmm.
maybe you love seeing, and then also maybe some who are like so active, but you're like, why are you so active? You're like, yeah, for better or worse, your most active members.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then I guess like logistically, how would you suggest starting a community? Is it on something like Slack? If you do get those indicators, maybe you do a survey at the end of an event and you get like, a good amount of people that say, yes, I would love to stay connected in
Mhm.
a more official way, let's say. What are some of the tools that people could use to start a community?
Oh, this deserves an entire episode, which actually
I'm
I
sure.
did I did record an episode for my podcast on this, talking about like we address this letter. So I have a podcast called Dear Bri. We talk through an anonymous letter from someone in the community space who has a community conundrum, drama, or fiasco. And so this particular episode was about like where should we build our community. And there's really like two, I'll just talk through briefly the categories. So in the past, people have social media kind of presented this initial technology for ways to connect virtually and online. I think we, over the last decade, have been sold a little bit of a false version of connection through social media when there maybe the promise was more of community, and what has resulted is audience building. So given the tools that we have had, a lot of people have really tried to foster community in these tools that are built with the purpose of building an audience. You can still build community there. And some of the pros are people already know, they already have logins, they already know how to interact there. I would put social media platforms like Facebook and Facebook groups in this category, but I would also put tools like Slack in this category. So I call them like social networks. And so you can still build communities there. I see a pretty dramatic shift happening, similar to the shift that happened with like app development over the last 10 years, where people are more willing to show up in an exclusive, dedicated, more intimate space away from social media, where they might have to learn some new behaviors, some new technology, but they might even have to pay for the experience. Usually like communities built on social networks are free or some combination of free. When we're talking about this new type of community, people are more willing to pay a little bit of money to know that they are in the right space with the right people who are either actively looking to solve the same problem that they are or have already solved it and they can learn from them. So for those communities, and these are really the ones that I specialize in, we tend to build them in what I call all-in-one community platforms. So I mentioned Heartbeat earlier. That's where I host my community. Some other top examples are Circle. Disco is one that caters to learning experiences. School is another popular one. I don't kind of understand why, but it's another one that people are gravitating towards. So I could like go all in on my like community platform wars and like do all the pros and cons, but just most broadly, that's like the landscape of where we see communities emerging online today.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I totally agree. I think there's this kind of shift with how people feel on social media, how much they actually want to be on social media, the kind of more toxic side of social media and kind of wanting to disconnect from it. A lot of these platforms, they're not really built for community. Like the way that the algorithm works, the way that those platforms make money is not necessarily
It's not from
like,
community.
it's
Nope.
not from community. So I think that's a really good point. And I also see myself gravitating even away from communities like Slack, like what you're saying, to, maybe I have to download an app on my phone, but at least I know that's like where I go to find that connection that I'm looking for. And I actually very much prefer that way. And then you're also not as dependent on like how these social networks change over time. Like it's almost a more valuable community because you have a more direct connection to these people. Is that
Yeah.
like a good
It's a great way of
thinking behind
describing
that?
it. Yep. My like strategist, friend strategist in the space, Noelle Flowers, calls them, like I call them all-in-one platforms. She calls them owned platforms. So it's like you own and like can customize the experience, and you like own that relationship with your members. Like in a Facebook group, you literally don't even get access to their email unless you like manually ask them for it. So it's a much more for people who are building communities that are like the lowest common denominator, like this isn't they might not see a ton of value in it, but you're just trying to like collect people in the hopes that they'll get exposed to whatever message or learning or value that you have. Something like a social network makes a lot more sense. For most of the communities that I build, like the intention is like we want to drive value for our members. And if we're going to drive high value, that also members are willing to show up more and differently and adopt new behavior if there's a high value in store for them. And if all of that works together seamlessly, like they will show up and participate, and usually a lot better than what the participation is that you glean in these pre-established spaces.
Yeah, definitely. I think that contact information piece is so critical too, because especially if you're, working for a tech company or more like a product, and then you have community that's kind of attached to it, it's really hard to know if you're reaching people when you're
Mm-hmm.
just putting things out on social media. But in the end, like the most valuable piece is still their email, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to, once they come into this community and, they like actively choose to be here, then you can put them into drip campaigns or like,
Mm-hmm.
a lot more of that. I want to say like traditional marketing works a lot better if you kind of go about it in that way.
Yeah, yeah. And where you identify like in the flow of like where your customer might be, right? If we think about like the marketing funnel, like community member really is like more bottom of the funnel. It's like it's at the end of your marketing. It's right where your like marketing ends and your community or in your offers begin, your paid offers. So well, actually, I said that very black and white. There's actually a lot of different places we could situate the community in your marketing funnel, which is what this whole 4 types of communities is all about. So I
Yeah.
scratch that last statement actually.
Well, let's get into, because I feel like this was all on the first quadrant, right?
Yeah, kind of. We deviated, but yeah, that was all. So nurturing community. I'll proceed into the second quadrant, which is where we have paid education centric communities. I call these transformative communities. And this is where what I mean by education centric, there's always as education happening, whether you're guiding it or it's coming because your members are connecting with each other. Like education is
Mm.
baked into the process. But what I mean by education centric is there's an intended learning journey for your member. So you're saying you're coming into this community at point A. We're going to take you on a road trip with this group of people to point B. By the end of this experience, you will know X, Y, and Z and have these outcomes. So it's very like psychologically clear for your members. It's easier to sell. It is also easier, like I said, because there's this articulated outcome and value, your members are more likely to adopt new technology or embrace spaces where they haven't previously gathered because they have this like really clear journey and destination in mind. So I've found that your members are probably more willing to trust the process in this type of community. Weaknesses of this community: your members, even though it's a communal educational environment, your members are coming for that journey. So they come attracted to
Mm.
this thing and this outcome, this destination. You are the guide walking them through it, but it takes extra intentional effort to turn your members towards each other because they don't always come with that intention. So you have to be really mindful if you're building a sticky community. You have to design to, or you have to be thoughtful in your design to make sure that you're not just helping your members engage with your content, but that you're slowly turning them towards each other.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I guess I'm trying to think of like an example that maybe I've gone through. And last year I did this B2B marketing course, which then turned into like these were weekly calls where we learned something very specific over like 2 months. And then you kind of engage with the other people in the course. And then at the end of it, you all get put into the Slack community. And I feel like that's the point where it actually got really hard to keep engaging. Like I saw a lot of people
Mm.
leaving.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are like really active on there, but there wasn't as much, I think, nurturing being done at that point. And I guess I'm
Yep.
curious, like, is that what you're talking about? Like that kind of structure? And then what are some tips on, I guess, thinking through the design of like when people get out of this structured part of the community journey?
Yes, perfect segue into the third category. So, the other thing I'll say about these education centric paid communities, and that was the perfect example, by the way. Another really great example is if you are familiar with Seth Godin's work and the company he helped start, Akimbo. They have like the Alt MBA program, the marketing seminar. Like they are like the original transformative community people. Even though he's like the marketing guy, I like in my mind he's the community guy. So that's a good example. The only other thing I'll mention about this is that these types of communities, because we're talking about this learning journey and this ultimate destination, these tend to work really well with like a time bound experience. So cohort based courses or like cohort based communities tend to fall into this category. What you articulated was this company, this experience you articulated the transition from the transformative community into what I call the networking community, which is quadrant 3. So this is a connection centric paid experience. And again, I'm making it sound really black and white and like this is the box, and then this is the box. Like you experienced, like it's very fluid. Like people might, move you from one into the other or just have a community that holds all four. That being said, I think probably a part of the reason why that transition felt so fumbled was because maybe they didn't actually think strategically about how you're taking people who came in for this educational experience. And now you're kind of telling them that they want something different and saying, like, but now here's connection. And to make that transition, you have to be extremely thoughtful and extremely sneaky. You have to like kind of like people come for the education and you have to sneak in the connection long before you throw them into a like ongoing Slack membership. Um, but connection centric communities tend to be more like a container where you're holding all of these interactions. So, unlike the education centric communities where everyone's coming from the same place, going to the same place, connection centric communities are like a city where people are coming and going from all different places. There might be like general alignment, but the value of what's being created there comes from the interactions between your members. And so your role as the community manager is really to prompt and provide supporting resources for those members to make connections. Now, the only other caveat to this I just want to acknowledge is like education is an outcome. Connection is like such a soft word and it's not really an outcome. Connection is a vessel for a different outcome. Like maybe, we are connecting so that we can get feedback on each other's work. We are connecting so that we can expand our networks. We are connecting so that. So it's not exactly like apples to apples on this one. And that's part of why these networking communities are so much harder to market because connection itself isn't an outcome. It's like the vessel to a different outcome. So you have to be really specific about what are you hoping this connection leads to and use that to market your offer for your community. Because connection in and of itself is so fuzzy and hazy for people that it's not really enough to get people into your community.
Yeah, I think kind of what I picked up from that at the end too is like you have to define what success looks like before you even start, which is so clear, like obvious when when you think about any project you're about to start. But I feel like with community, it's hard to know like what's successful. Is it the amount of interactions that are happening? Like there's so many things that you could be looking at, but I guess from your perspective, like what are some common success metrics that people look at for if their community is working?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So there's the actual metrics that you can more easily track within your community platform, which is like how many DMs are being sent or how many posts are being created or how many comments are being made. Then there's like the actual like tangible outcome of like how many people in our community referred business to another person in our community or how many members like took up another member on the offer that they listed when they joined. So frankly, like the analytics and data is not there right now to be able to like support what it's so soft and connection is so soft. It's hard to like it's more difficult to design for. But if you can do it well, those connection centric communities are actually the stickiest and the strongest spaces. And they're like massively, I think we're going to see over the next decade, like a massive amount of investment from brands like acquiring these communities that are connection centric specifically, because they have like such a strong foundation. So those are like some of the, I don't know if that makes sense, the different types of metrics, and one you can track and the other you really can't, but that's the one that's most important.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like an overall marketing challenge, is just like attribution and
Mm-hmm.
figuring out like what was it really that got this person taking this action. And a lot of the times it's like months out, and it's really hard to measure success in the moment as it is
Yeah.
in marketing in general. But then I feel like, yeah, community is so, connection so soft. Like it's such a, it's in people's minds, you know, it's
Mm-hmm.
like stuff that's completely unseen a lot of the time too. Or if they take actions like outside of that community, like maybe, you know, they started connecting over email, they introed someone to someone
Yeah.
else, and like, okay, like that was like exactly what we were trying to do, but
Yeah.
we didn't see that side of it.
Yeah.
But I think the other part of what you said is like seeing, you think there's going to be a lot more investment in communities over the next couple years. And I actually was recently talking to someone who's about to do one of these podcast recordings as well, but she's a good friend of mine, marketing mentor, who is like the queen of paid ads. Like she is just so good at paid ads. She has a super scientific mind about it, and she has seen like such great success with it. But she is actually moving over to more community focused marketing, specifically like newsletters is what she's really into right now, and growing community through there. But it's interesting when you see these people who are like so focused on this one thing start to see the limitations of it,
Mm-hmm.
of things like LinkedIn or Facebook, or just relying on ads and kind of being like tied to whatever Google Ads is doing right now and how they decide to just do
Yeah.
anything, or LinkedIn and Facebook. Like you're kind of at the mercy of these external platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, like for one, the connection piece I think is just becoming more important for everyone, just humans. We're all
Mm-hmm.
feeling so much more disconnected as it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, like going back to again, you own this community. So, yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's a really interesting observation too, that like something that's like so data centric, right? Paid ads, like so black and white, so clear. Like you can, put it on the chopping block if it's not performing, if that ad isn't performing. And that's fascinating to hear the migration to this like softer science of people, which like if you are a brand or even like a solopreneur, consultant, coach, creator, like getting into the community space, get comfortable with not having all the data. Because if you are waiting to have all of the data and have like quote proof that this community is going to be whatever you hope it to be for your community, you will miss the boat and you will spend a lot of time waiting, and you will see incredible communities pop up all around you. So it's really the ones who are like willing to embrace that risk and know that they're doing it because they care about their members, they care about their customers, and they're willing to like let go of some of that control of seeing the exact data and analytics come in. When they're willing to do that, that's where I see communities really start to thrive and serve their business in ways that are remarkable.
Yeah, the soft science of people. That's a quote right there. That's epic. It's so true, though. I think we have one quadrant left. Am I getting that
We
right?
do, yes. So we'll come full circle to our bottom left. This is where I call them collaborative communities. And these are free communities that are connection centric. So a lot of these communities started in Facebook groups. They started in that like social, when we talked about like where we can host these communities, and I talked about social networks, like they tend to start there because, and just in general for connection centric communities, because the value of that community comes from interactions between members, it's usually more important to at least start this community in a place where people already are. which kind of sucks. As a community strategist, I hate that for us. But it's
Yeah.
just kind of the reality of like, because you are wanting to leverage like interactions between members, the most important thing for this community design is to make sure there are zero barriers and obstacles to those interactions happening between your members. So a lot of these popped up in Facebook groups. I put a lot of Slack communities in this category. I also have a podcast called Community Dissection, where I dissect different community experiences with another community expert. So a great example of this one is the community. It's for senior community professionals. And yes, drink whenever I say the word community. We'll make it a drinking game or a bingo card, whichever is your style. And so check out that example. I also have like examples of all these different types of communities on there. That series has like 38 episodes of different types of communities. So you can find one that most aligns with what you want to build and see what they're doing well, see what they're not doing well, and don't replicate it. But that's a great example. And these are some of the most like, I mean, they're probably like, they're struggling right now because I think a lot of like Facebook groups and like social network communities are in general struggling, and they're trying to pivot into one of the other quadrants. But there's also these are like some of my favorite communities. Another great example is Lego Ideas. So this is a product centric community, and it's a community where people submit CAD designs for new Lego sets that they want to see created, and then the whole community just upvotes which CAD designs they want to see brought to production. And then once I don't know if it's like they have to be like the top winner for that season, or like maybe it passed a certain threshold, they go into production. But it's like, it is like cultic, the level of like intensity and like that you outsourced like all of this product design and creation and discovery to your like community of members is crazy to me, and should be crazy to everybody.
That's epic. I had no idea this existed, but that's all I was thinking about too as you were talking. Like, what an amazing way to do one like customer research, like on the ground, like see what people actually want, and then also involve them in the creation of the thing that they're going to buy. Like, what? That's
Yeah.
such a great idea. It works really well for Legos, I feel like, or any kind of, like you said, like it's kind of cult vibes. Any product that's kind of like has a really massive following in that way. I feel like that's a great idea to try to do something like that.
Yeah, it comes from so what's important to note is that like, because you can look at this like thriving community and be like, how did that happen? And a lot of those like really the Notion community is another example of like what I would say was like it was a product centric company. Like they had a really phenomenal product, and their community just sort of like spontaneously combusted from within. Like, again, it's like that spontaneous combustion. Oh my God, we're bringing it full circle.
Full
this
circle.
is so
This
amazing.
Epic.
So yeah, it's easy to look at some of these spontaneously combusted communities and be like, oh, that's what we want. And it's like, actually, that came from like just making sure that you had the best product of all time, and people loved it so much that they couldn't help but like talk about it and then teach others how to use it and yada 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 yada. So I wouldn't say that they're the best examples to like model off of. I mean, there is a lesson in that like if you like really invest in your product first and make sure that's phenomenal, your community will evolve and unfold from within. So those are two examples.
I love that idea. And I feel like that's like a whole other episode, is talking about, how much the actual product, if you are in that type of business, how much your product actually has power to do all these other things without you even putting like a crazy investment in it. So that's really interesting too, to think about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I want to end this off with, if for like a business, if they're thinking of starting a community, what do you feel like, maybe set some expectations on what they should put aside for resources, whether it's, monetary resources or like people, what do you feel like someone needs to think about like having in their back pocket if they're actually going to start and nurture a community?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple options for if you're like intrigued by this concept and like want to build a community. The first is that you can actually do like if you're a big company and this is like a would be a big investment, I would really recommend hiring a consultant like myself to come in and do a discovery project with and look like internally at your team, like is what's the temperature for your team,
Mm-hmm.
because like this is always a really fun shiny idea for the CEO to latch onto, but like are the people executing actually into it? So
Ding, ding,
internally,
ding.
yeah. So good, important questions to ask. So internally, what's
Yeah.
the temperature? Externally, what's the temperature? Like when I come on for projects like this, we do customer interviews, we send surveys. Like, are your customers ready for something like this? And then like scope out the project. So like, what type of community should you build, and like what would the resources be that would be required, and like, are you as a company prepared for that? So that's like one option is you can hire a consultant like me to like come in and do the work to like set up a project like that. The other more like grassroots option is to, if you can identify, if it's really clear to you like which type of community you want to start with, I always say like start with one communal experience. So rather than calling it a community, test a communal experience that aligns with the quadrant that you think you want to build on. So if that's a transformative community, maybe you host and make it small, like make it like really short, because like good experiments are like short and give you data quickly. Don't make it a year long. But if it's a transformative community, you could say we're going to host an accelerator for 4 weeks and we're going to see if people will pay, number one, and we're going to see if they get the outcome that we think they're going to get. Like that's a great test. It's really simple. It's like short. And then you can see like maybe this is something that we roll out on a bigger like community scope. But for now, don't even call it a community. Just call it like the accelerator. And you can do the same for each of the quadrants.
I love that. And yeah, short and sweet for experiments. Sometimes harder to do than you think. If you have a big idea, like actually thinking about like what's that first experiment look like? And I think you gave like two really great things to look at is like, will people pay? And are they actually getting out of it the thing that you were thinking they would get out of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. I think that's a great thing to end on. But before we go, I wanted to ask you, for one, where can people find you? And you're doing some cool things that they can follow along with. But also, what's something you're excited about, both in your personal and professional life?
Yeah. Oh man. Well, people can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I love conversing with people there. Also, my website has more information about my services and my community. So if anything here aligns and you are looking for more support in the community spaces, I would love to chat. And then something I'll hop to the next question, which is something professionally that I'm really excited about, is the launch of my podcast, Dear Bri, which I mentioned. So it's an advice column for community conundrums, fiascos, and drama. It's really community strategy under the guise of like dramatic storytelling and taking these anonymous questions from community creators. So that drops next week, August 13th, our first 3 episodes. Or I don't know when this will release, but it comes out August 13th. So find it wherever you find your podcasts. Something personally I'm excited about. Oh, well, I mean, really simple, but we have a backpacking trip coming up to this like really amazing, beautiful, sacred beach called Waimanu. I said backpacking, but because we usually backpack there, but we're actually going to try to go there via kayak via
Ooh.
the ocean, which I've never done before. So like I'm super excited. I think it'll be like a really fun adventure. But it's kind of like gnarly waves sometimes. So I'm like also anticipating that our kayak will tip over at some point.
I love how you said like, oh, this is like very simple. And then you go into saying like, oh no, we're like gonna cross the ocean on a kayak.
I mean, that makes it sound really dramatic. It's not quite that dramatic.
No, but it can get dramatic. I've been on a
Yeah.
kayak on the ocean once in Australia with my brother when
Oh.
I was like 20. And it was like storming and very scary.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
imagining when you're talking about this.
Yeah. I mean, if the weather's bad, you can get messed up real fast. So, yeah, we'll make sure the
Yeah.
weather and like all the elements are aligned before we
All the
take the risk.
Well, that sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Bri, for being on the podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation and can't wait to listen to your podcast as well. I think it'll be out sooner. I mean, it will be because we're recording this a few days before it comes out. So yeah, very excited to listen. And yeah, to the listener, we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.